Have you ever been preparing for the biggest news of your life, only to have it ripped out of your hands in a single instant? I was 10 weeks pregnant, and before I could even tell anyone, the world already knew. Every text, every message, every notification felt like a punch straight to my heart. And that's when everything began to unravel. I always thought that the most important secret of my life deserved to be handled with the utmost care, each step deliberate, each word measured. Being 26 and pregnant was not something I wanted to broadcast to the world immediately. My fiancé and I had agreed that we would tell our closest family members first and keep it a secret from friends, colleagues, and acquaintances until after the first trimester. It was a pact we took seriously, a promise to respect each other and the tiny life growing inside me. The morning it all began felt ordinary at first. I woke with that strange flutter in my stomach, a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness. Sunlight poured through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the floor. And there he was, my fiancé, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware that my heart was already racing. I approached quietly, careful not to let my emotions give anything away. "Hey," he said, looking up and smiling. It was the kind of smile that could make the world pause for a second, a smile that made everything feel safe. I sat across from him, the note of caution in my chest louder than ever. I have something to tell you," I said softly, almost whispering, as if the words themselves could shatter fragile glass. He put his phone down, leaning forward, eyes curious and bright. "What is it?" A tiny, almost imperceptible smile played at the corner of my lips as I let the words slip out. "We're going to have a baby." There was a moment of silence, a pause that felt like it stretched across eternity. Then, his expression broke into pure, unfiltered joy. His eyes glistened, his hands trembled slightly as he reached for mine, and in that instant, everything else faded. It was just the two of us, and this miracle quietly beginning to grow within me. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement wrestled with anxiety, anticipation tangled with fear. Every meal, every interaction, every glance I exchanged with friends or colleagues became an exercise in restraint. I meticulously avoided certain topics, sidestepped personal questions, and rehearsed small lies to maintain the secrecy of our tiny, private world. We had created a security plan around our pregnancy, at least. That's what I told myself. Then came the weekend family dinner, a small, intimate gathering meant to celebrate life, love, and the coming together of our families. My fiancé and I had meticulously planned every detail, down to the seating arrangements and the menu. And of course, his sister was coming. I'd never been particularly close with her, but we had cordial interactions. She smiled, asked the usual questions, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity, maybe suspicion that I couldn't quite place. I moved through the evening with a careful balance of composure and charm, keeping conversations light, laughter frequent, and my emotions under tight rein. Each toast, each smile, each clink of glasses felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong word, one glance too long, could unravel everything we had so carefully constructed. Between bites of roasted chicken and sips of wine, I caught glimpses of my fiancé's face across the table. He was laughing, chatting, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Yet in his presence, I felt safe, grounded. I reminded myself repeatedly, just a few more weeks. Just until the first trimester is over. And then we can tell the world in our own way, on our own terms. But fate has a strange way of intervening when you least expect it. And I had no idea that within a few days, the plan we had built with such care would be obliterated, sending me spiraling into a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and helplessness that I could never have anticipated. Days passed, and life seemed to settle into a rhythm of cautious secrecy. Every morning I would wake up, placing a hand on my belly, feeling that tiny flutter, and reminding myself, don't tell anyone. Not yet. Even the smallest slip could unravel everything. Each conversation at work, each message from a friend, was a delicate dance. I had to smile, laugh, act like nothing had changed, while a storm of emotions roiled inside me. At home, it was different. My fiancé and I shared a quiet, sacred space where we could whisper about baby names, dreams, fears. He'd brush a strand of hair from my face, and I could feel the weight of his calm reassurance. Those moments were my sanctuary, a brief escape from the tension that clung to every social interaction. Yet, even there, I felt the pressure building, the awareness that one careless word or glance could shatter our carefully constructed world. Then came the prelude to disaster: family gatherings. My in-laws were wonderful people, warm and loving, but they were also social creatures, eager to celebrate and share joy. Each time we joined them, I had to gauge their curiosity, anticipate questions, and prepare answers that would keep our secret safe. Every smile had to be measured, every laugh carefully placed, every interaction choreographed like a scene in a play. I was desperately trying not to forget the lines to. It was during one of these gatherings that I first noticed her, his sister. She had an effortless charm, a way of making people feel at ease, but there was also a sharpness in her gaze, a mischievous curiosity that set my nerves on edge. She'd ask casual questions, laugh lightly at anecdotes, but there was an undercurrent of probing, an almost imperceptible pressure. I had to remind myself, don't let her see. Don't give anything away. My heartbeat quickened every time she leaned a little too close or laughed a little too knowingly. At home, after the gatherings, I would replay every moment in my mind. Did I smile too long? Did my eyes betray me when she asked about future plans? Could she tell? I found myself obsessing over each word, each expression, as though decoding some hidden language. I even caught myself avoiding certain foods, certain gestures, anything that might hint at the pregnancy before I was ready. Work became another battlefield. Even in casual conversations, I measured my words. Friends would ask about my weekend, my health, my mood, and I had to dance around questions with practiced ease. I mastered the art of diverting attention, of creating small, believable narratives that would satisfy curiosity without exposing the truth. Each interaction was a test of self-control, each smile a shield. And yet, despite all my efforts, the tension never fully lifted. I carried a constant undercurrent of anxiety, a fear that any misstep could trigger a chain reaction beyond my control. Evenings at home were bittersweet. I would cook, setting the table, listening to the clatter of plates and the hum of the refrigerator, and try to enjoy the simple things: the warm glow of the lamp, the soft music playing in the background, his hand brushing against mine in a casual, reassuring touch. We would sit, eat slowly, and talk quietly about our plans for the future. Those were the moments I treasured most, yet even in them, the shadow of secrecy lingered. Each happy thought was tinged with fear. Will it stay like this? Can we really keep it hidden? And then came the small, subtle signs that the outside world was closing in. A friend would comment on my appearance: "You look radiant today," and I would panic, wondering if they could guess. Colleagues would joke about family planning, and I would force a laugh, feeling my throat tighten. Every notification on my phone made my stomach twist in knots. I was living a dual life, outwardly normal, inwardly frantic, balancing joy with dread. Through all of this, my fiancé was my anchor. He understood my fears, my need for control, and never pressured me to share before I was ready. He would hold me when I cried in private, reassure me when I spiraled into anxiety, and celebrate each milestone with quiet, profound joy. His presence was a steadying force in a world that often felt chaotic and threatening, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the delicate balance we had created was fragile. Every family dinner, every social outing, every casual encounter was a reminder that secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of slipping out. And I knew, deep down, that sooner or later, something or someone would challenge our fragile sanctuary. Then, there were the moments of quiet reflection. Alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, I would touch my belly and whisper promises. I will protect you. I will keep you safe. No one will take this moment away from us. Those whispers were my mantra, a tiny lifeline in a world that seemed poised to unravel everything we had built. But the tension wasn't just in my mind. It was in the air at family gatherings, in the playful glances exchanged across the table, in the subtle probing questions, in the way his sister lingered a little too long near me, laughing a little too knowingly. Every interaction required vigilance. Every smile demanded calculation. I was walking on eggshells, acutely aware that one misstep could send ripples through the fragile fabric of our carefully constructed secret, and yet, life continued in its relentless flow. Bills had to be paid, groceries bought, work completed. I moved through each day with a dual consciousness, outwardly calm, inwardly vigilant, holding on to joy while bracing for disaster. My body carried a secret that no one else could see. My heart carried fears no one else could comprehend. and my mind spun with calculations and contingencies. In those quiet moments, I realized how much I craved control, how desperately I needed to dictate the terms of our narrative. This was our story, our miracle, and I would protect it at all costs. Every heartbeat, every flutter, every whispered promise became a testament to the fragility and beauty of what we were safeguarding. Little did I know, though, that all this meticulous control, all this careful planning, was about to be tested in a way I could never have anticipated. And it would happen not with malice, not with ill intent, but with the casual click of a button that would send our secret hurtling out into the world. I remember it as if it were yesterday, the ping of my phone cutting through the quiet of the evening. A notification, small and innocuous, appeared on the screen. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then, my heart lurched as I read the preview. Tagged in a story. I froze. My hands trembled slightly as I opened Instagram. And there it was, his sister's smiling face, a casual, cheerful caption, "Cooking together for the family dinner this weekend. Can't wait to meet our little niece or nephew." The words hit me like a physical blow. My secret, our secret, out in the open for everyone tagged and everyone who followed her account to see. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and the world around me seemed to tilt. I was flooded with an onslaught of notifications, texts, messages, calls, all piling in at once. More than 50 messages from friends, coworkers, acquaintances, all before I even had the chance to process what had happened. My mind raced. How did this happen? Was it intentional? Was it a mistake? I felt a rising tide of panic, anger, betrayal. Every carefully constructed plan, every day spent guarding this secret, vanished in a single, thoughtless click. I called her immediately. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. When she answered, I couldn't hold back. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "Do you know how many people just found out before we were ready?" There was a pause on the other end, a soft, guilty sound. I didn't mean to, it was an accident," she stammered. "I forgot. I was just joking. I didn't think." I felt my blood pressure spike. An accident? A joke? "Do you have any idea how serious this is? This is my life, my choice, my timing, and you just threw it into the world like it's nothing." I could hear her sniffle, the faint sound of her crying, but it didn't matter. Nothing could erase the wave of messages flooding my phone. Nothing could stop the anxiety, the humiliation, the sense of powerlessness. I was angry, terrified, and profoundly violated. And then, just as quickly, came the subtle dread, the anticipation of family reactions. My parents, his parents, coworkers, friends, they would all know now, and there was nothing I could do to retract it. I felt exposed, raw, like someone had stripped away the protective layers around the most intimate part of my life. I ended the call abruptly, my hands shaking, and sank into the sofa. My fiancé sat beside me, silent but aware, taking my hand in his. I could feel his steadying presence, the anchor amid the storm raging inside me. "They didn't know yet," I whispered, almost to myself. "We weren't ready. We weren't supposed to. Not like this." He nodded, squeezing my hand gently. "I know, I'm here. We'll figure this out together." But nothing could undo the chaos that had been unleashed. Notifications continued to pour in. Messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in months, coworkers I barely knew, acquaintances who suddenly seemed intimately aware of my personal life. Each ping, each buzz, a reminder of the loss of control, of the violation of trust. My thoughts were spinning. Why would she do this? Was it really a mistake? Did she not understand the consequences? I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle: anger at her carelessness, fear of judgment from others, grief for the moment of privacy that had been stolen. Then the tears came. I didn't even notice at first, silent, hot tears streaming down my face. My fiancé held me as I shook, my body trembling with a combination of fury, fear, and helplessness. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. I wanted to rewind time, to erase the digital footprint, to protect our secret at all costs. But the world had already seen it, and yet, beneath the anger, a deeper realization settled in. This wasn't just about the post. It wasn't just about the messages or the notifications. It was about trust, about respect, about boundaries that had been disregarded. Someone had crossed a line, one I thought was inviolable. And now I had to confront not only the person responsible, but the family dynamic that allowed it to happen. I called his sister again, calmer this time, but no less firm. We need to talk. Seriously, this isn't just a joke. You've crossed a line, and there are consequences. I don't know how we move past this yet, but it's not okay. Her voice was quiet, shaky. I'm sorry. I didn't think. I know, I said, but that's not enough. This was our moment, our choice. And now it's gone. I hung up, my mind racing with scenarios, outcomes, and strategies. How do I navigate family gatherings now? How do I manage the flood of attention from friends and coworkers? How do I protect the sanctity of our secret, our family, and our pregnancy from further intrusion? My fiancé and I spent hours that night talking, planning, strategizing. We discussed boundaries, consequences, and how we would communicate with family moving forward. The emotional toll was immense, but the conversation also strengthened our bond, solidifying our shared commitment to protect this fragile, beautiful life growing within me. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation, the sense that the world had suddenly intruded into my private life. And yet, intertwined with that fear, there was a fierce determination and unyielding promise to safeguard our future, to take control back and to reclaim the narrative that had been stolen from us. Little did I know, though, that this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of that post would extend far beyond my phone screen, challenging family dynamics, trust, and the very foundation of our relationships in ways I couldn't yet anticipate. The morning after the Instagram disaster, I woke with a hollow feeling in my chest. The sun was shining through the blinds, but it felt like it had lost its warmth. The world outside seemed oblivious to the chaos that had erupted in my life overnight. And yet inside, everything was tense, fragile, and raw. My fiancé was already up, making coffee, trying to infuse normalcy into the day. But there was no normalcy anymore, not after what had happened. Every notification I had received still lingered in my mind, like a swarm of tiny, invisible bees, buzzing incessantly, reminding me of what had been lost: control, privacy, trust. Soon enough, the inevitable confrontation came. My fiancé's parents arrived, their expressions a mixture of concern and subtle irritation. I could sense it immediately. Their eyes flickered between me and him, trying to gauge the mood, trying to understand the chaos that had clearly already begun to unfold. I saw the story, his mother said, her voice deceptively calm. Everyone is so excited. Don't you feel happy? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain composed. Happy? I echoed, voice tight. Yes, of course I'm happy. But this was our choice, and it was supposed to be our timing. His father interjected, tone rising slightly, frustration leaking through his usually controlled demeanor. You're overreacting. It's just a post on social media. Everyone's thrilled. You're turning a small mistake into a huge problem. A surge of anger flared within me. A small mistake? Do you even understand what this means to me? To us, this wasn't just a post. It was our secret, our plan, our moment to share. And now it's gone. Just gone. They looked at me puzzled, as if my outrage was disproportionate, unwarranted. But to me, it wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. Violation, a piercing sense that my boundaries had been ignored by people I expected to understand. I felt the tears prick the corners of my eyes, and my voice softened, carrying a mixture of hurt and determination. I trusted your daughter, and I trusted you all to respect our decision. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's excitement, but I will not allow my life, my pregnancy, my choices, to be broadcast or controlled by others. Not like this, not without my consent. The room fell silent. The tension was palpable, almost electric. My fiancé placed a hand on my back, steadying me, reminding me that I was not alone, that we were in this together. His mother's eyes filled with a flicker of hurt, her lips pressed together tightly. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were happy for you. Can't you see that everyone's celebrating? I shook my head slowly, taking a deep breath. I see your happiness, but you can't measure it against my right to control my own story. Being excited doesn't excuse disregarding my boundaries. I needed this moment to be ours, not everyone else's. His father exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. You're tearing the family apart over a social media post. I felt a pang of sadness and frustration. Was I really tearing the family apart? Or was I simply defending myself against a violation of trust? The line felt blurred. I realized then that sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing against the people you love. Sometimes protecting what's sacred requires creating friction, tension, and even anger. I looked around the room, letting my gaze settle on my fiancé. His calm presence reminded me that I wasn't alone, that we were a team, that we were the protectors of this tiny, vulnerable life. I squared my shoulders and continued, voice steady, resolute. This isn't about ruining anyone's joy. It's about respect. It's about understanding that our choices, our timing, and our privacy matter. I love you all, but I will not compromise on this. If that makes me seem harsh or unreasonable to you, then so be it. This is non-negotiable. His mother's lips trembled, and I could see the conflict in her eyes, a mixture of disappointment, concern, and slowly dawning understanding. His father's jaw tightened, but there was a subtle shift, a reluctant acknowledgement that I was serious, unwavering. After a long pause, my fiancé spoke. I'm with her. We're in this together. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of an unshakable alliance. I felt a rush of relief, gratitude, and strength. Finally, someone on my side, someone who understood the stakes, someone who would protect the boundaries we had set. The rest of the day was spent navigating strained conversations, answering hesitant questions, and slowly reasserting control over the narrative that had been stolen. Every interaction was a delicate balance, acknowledging the family's excitement while making clear that our privacy and our choices could not be compromised again. By nightfall, I was exhausted, but resolute. The battle lines had been drawn, the rules established, and I knew that from this point forward, no one could dictate the terms of our story. Our secret, our life, our pregnancy, it belonged to us. And though the scars of betrayal and chaos lingered, I felt a profound sense of empowerment. I had stood up, claimed my space, and defended what mattered most. As I lay in bed beside my fiancé that night, feeling the subtle flutter of life within me, I whispered promises into the quiet darkness. No one can take this from us. Not now, not ever. We will protect this, together. And for the first time since the Instagram post, I felt a flicker of calm. The storm had not passed, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, but we were ready. We had each other. We had our child. And we had the unwavering resolve to navigate whatever came next, on our own terms and at our own pace. The next morning, the weight of the Instagram story hit me like a tidal wave. My phone was relentless, buzzing, chiming, vibrating, every notification a reminder that our carefully guarded secret was no longer ours. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping the sheets, trying to brace myself for the onslaught. It started with text messages, one after another, pinging my phone like raindrops on a metal roof. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months, acquaintances from work, even distant family members, all suddenly aware of the news. Each message began innocuously enough, congratulations, emojis, little hearts, but it quickly became overwhelming. I scrolled, my heart sinking with every name, every message. How did she think this was okay? I thought, gripping my phone until my knuckles went white. The excitement in their words, the joy they felt, was suffocating, invasive. They didn't understand the timing, the careful plan we had, the vulnerability that came with such a personal revelation. I felt exposed, like someone had torn down the walls of my most intimate space and invited the world in without permission. At work, it was even more surreal. Colleagues stopped by my desk with wide smiles, pretending to be casual, but their eyes betrayed curiosity. Hey, congrats. We saw the post, they said, laughter in their voices, oblivious to the storm churning inside me. I forced smiles, nodded, whispered polite thank yous, and felt a pang of resentment. Every glance, every question, every well-meaning comment chipped away at my sense of control. I went to the restroom once, needing a moment to breathe. Leaning against the sink, staring at my reflection, I felt a wave of panic rise. My reflection seemed foreign, almost like a stranger had taken my place. My eyes were red-rimmed, my cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. I whispered to myself, this was supposed to be our secret, not theirs. Even the digital world felt hostile. Notifications kept coming, social media posts, comments, direct messages, all echoing the same sentiment. Everyone knew. Everyone was excited. Everyone was watching. And I, who had so carefully navigated this delicate balance, felt like a hostage in my own life. By mid-morning, I was physically shaking. My hands trembled as I tried to focus on emails, on tasks, on the mundane responsibilities of my job. But my mind kept returning to the flood of messages, to the casual betrayal of someone I had trusted, to the loss of our carefully timed revelation during lunch. I tried to retreat into the quiet of the cafeteria, sitting alone with my salad, pretending to eat, pretending to read. But everywhere I looked, eyes seemed to linger, whispers floated on the edge of hearing, phones subtly angled in my direction. The world had changed overnight. I had changed, and I couldn't escape the feeling that my life had been placed under a microscope without my consent. At home that evening, my fiancé held me as I collapsed into the couch. My tears were unstoppable, a torrent of frustration, fear, and grief. "I can't believe she did this," I murmured between sobs. "I can't believe anyone would just post it like that. Like it's nothing." He stroked my hair, steady and reassuring. I know. It wasn't okay. But we can get through this together. We'll figure it out." The next few days were a blur. Texts kept coming. People wanted to talk, to congratulate, to know details. I became exhausted, mentally and emotionally, from fielding conversations I hadn't agreed to have. Every interaction required careful calibration. Every word had to be measured, every reaction calculated. The sense of betrayal lingered like a shadow, coloring every encounter. Even outside the house, the world felt different. Friends who had been casual acquaintances suddenly approached me with curiosity, excitement, and a sense of entitlement I hadn't expected. They wanted details, milestones, plans, names, everything we hadn't decided to share yet. I realized painfully that my personal life had been broadcast without consent, and now everyone felt entitled to a piece of it. I also started to notice the ripple effect in unexpected ways. Invitations to social events came with subtle references to the pregnancy. Comments on social media posts I hadn't shared hinted at insider knowledge. Even strangers at the grocery store offered congratulations, as if they had the right to intrude upon a life I hadn't agreed to display publicly. Through all of this, my fiancé remained my anchor. He fielded messages, redirected questions, and reassured me when I felt myself fraying. Together, we devised a strategy: limits on communication, selective responses, boundaries firmly established. Yet, despite the plans, the emotional toll was undeniable. I began to understand something crucial: even those who mean well can overstep boundaries if the lines aren't clearly defined. Even excitement and joy, if expressed without consent, can become a form of violation. And the person responsible, the one who had thoughtlessly posted the story, was now looming in every conversation. Every message, a constant reminder of how fragile privacy can be, I realized. As I lay awake that night, listening to the soft breathing of my fiancé beside me, that this was a turning point. My control had been stripped, my timing ignored, and my boundaries violated. And now, the real challenge was not just navigating the flood of social attention, it was confronting the person responsible, reinforcing our boundaries, and reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen from us. The storm had arrived, not in the form of anger from strangers, but in the subtle erosion of trust, the sense of exposure, the feeling that our lives were suddenly a spectacle. And in that moment, I vowed no one would dictate the terms of our story again. Not her, not anyone. We were entering a new phase, one that required courage, strategy, and unwavering commitment to each other and the life we were creating. The Instagram post had been a catalyst, a warning, a painful lesson, but it was also an opportunity. An opportunity to define our boundaries, assert our control, and take ownership of the narrative that belonged solely to us. Little did I know that this would only be the beginning. The ripple effect would spread through family, friends, and acquaintances, testing my resolve, my patience, and my capacity to protect what mattered most. And through it all, I had to remind myself, our secret may have been exposed, but our story was far from over. It had been a week since the Instagram story. The flood of messages had slowed, but the tension had only grown heavier. I could feel it whenever we were near her, my fiancé's sister. Her presence was like a constant, unspoken reminder of the chaos she had caused. Every smile felt loaded, every word carefully measured. I could see it in the way she avoided my gaze, yet lingered near enough to make my skin crawl. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. Something had to give. The uncertainty, the simmering anger, the betrayal, it all needed to be addressed, laid bare, and resolved. And so, I made the decision to confront her directly, The moment was quiet, deceptively casual. We were at the family house for a weekend gathering, and I caught her in the kitchen, arranging dishes with that same effortless smile she always wore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "We need to talk," I said, voice firm but controlled. She froze, her hands pausing mid-motion. "Oh, okay," she said, a hint of nervousness creeping into her tone. "About what?" "About your Instagram post," I said, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "About sharing something that wasn't yours to share. About the way you completely disregarded my wishes, our plans, and our privacy." Her smile faltered, replaced by guilt, or was it defensiveness? "I didn't mean anything by it," she said, almost too quickly. "I was just joking. I forgot. I didn't think it would matter that much." I felt a flash of anger, hot and consuming. "You didn't think it would matter? Do you even understand what you did? You broadcasted the most personal moment of my life to hundreds of people before we were ready. You didn't just make a mistake, you violated our trust. You disregarded our boundaries. You betrayed us." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a step back. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it would cause so much trouble. I thought everyone would be happy for you. I didn't think." "Don't you dare say you didn't think," I cut her off, my voice shaking with fury and hurt. "This wasn't about whether people were happy. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about us. And you didn't care about any of that." She looked down, her hands fidgeting with the edge of a dish towel. I could see the remorse, but it wasn't enough. Words alone couldn't undo the wave of anxiety, the emotional invasion, the public exposure. "I trusted you," I continued, quieter now but no less firm. "I trusted you to respect our timing. I trusted you not to make our private moment public. And now I don't know if I can trust you the same way again." The tension in the room was palpable. I could hear the faint clatter of dishes from the other side of the kitchen. But between us, the world had shrunk to this moment, this confrontation, this reckoning. She swallowed hard, then spoke, voice small and trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't. Can we just move past it, please?" I shook my head slowly. "It's not that simple. Moving past it requires understanding. And right now, I don't feel like you understand. You need to realize the weight of what you did. You need to understand why this matters so much." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, and I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes. But the hurt she caused couldn't just vanish because she felt sorry. The trust that had been broken needed to be acknowledged, respected, and rebuilt, and that would take time. My fiancé appeared then, standing beside me, a calm presence amidst the storm. He placed a hand on my back, a silent show of support, and looked at his sister. "She's right," he said gently but firmly. "You need to understand how serious this is. This isn't just a joke. This is about respect, privacy, and family boundaries. We need to be clear about this from now on." Her sobs grew quieter, more controlled, but the weight of the moment lingered. I realized that this confrontation, while painful, was necessary. It was a declaration. Our boundaries mattered, our privacy mattered, and we would not be disregarded. As the conversation ended, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. Exhaustion from the emotional intensity, relief from finally speaking my truth, relief from asserting my voice. The storm hadn't passed entirely, but a line had been drawn, clear and unambiguous. Later that evening, as I lay in bed beside my fiancé, I reflected on the day. Confronting her hadn't been easy. It had required courage, patience, and unwavering conviction. But it was a pivotal step in reclaiming control over our lives and our story. I knew this was only the beginning. The repercussions of her actions would ripple through our social circles, our extended family, and perhaps even beyond. But for now, we had established our ground rules. We had faced the breach head on. And in that, I found a sense of empowerment, a fragile, but real, feeling of control returning to our narrative. The journey ahead would be challenging, emotional, and at times painful. But we were no longer passive participants in the unfolding story. We were active, vocal, and protective. And that made all the difference. The days that followed the confrontation with my sister-in-law were a complicated blur of emotions, messages, and awkward interactions. Even though the direct conflict had been addressed, the repercussions rippled outward, reaching parts of my life I hadn't expected. Friends who had been casual acquaintances now treated me differently. Their congratulations came with an undercurrent of expectation, as though they were entitled to know more, to be included in a story that had been hours and hours alone. At work, colleagues lingered at my desk, asking innocuous questions about baby names, plans, and timelines. Each inquiry, each glance, was a reminder that our private lives had been exposed. I felt like a character in a play where everyone had access to the script except me. Family gatherings became particularly tense. His parents tried to maintain a sense of calm and normalcy, but it was clear they were aware of the social scrutiny that had erupted. Every cousin, every aunt, every distant relative seemed to have caught wind of the news, and suddenly, our gatherings became arenas for subtle questioning and quiet observation. "Congratulations," a cousin said brightly at one dinner, her eyes flicking toward my belly. "We can't wait to meet the little one." I forced a smile, nodding politely, while internally bracing myself. Every word felt calculated, every reaction carefully measured. I was walking through a minefield of social expectations, familial excitement, and uninvited curiosity. The room seemed charged with energy, each conversation laced with the unspoken tension of our disrupted privacy. Even casual visits from neighbors and acquaintances brought the same weight. Every interaction was filtered through the lens of the Instagram post, and every casual mention of our pregnancy chipped away at the careful boundaries we had attempted to maintain. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and at times, trapped in a world that seemed to demand access to our most intimate moments. The pressure wasn't just social, it was emotional. I found myself feeling guilty for being angry, for wanting privacy, for asserting my boundaries. People were excited, happy, celebratory, and yet, I couldn't enjoy their joy. The violation of trust lingered like a shadow, coloring every interaction, every laugh, every smile. My fiancé remained my anchor, guiding me through each encounter. "Just take a breath," he would whisper when a relative pried too much. "You don't owe anyone an explanation. We'll handle this together." Together, we developed strategies, selective responses, careful deflection, and deliberate avoidance when necessary. But despite our efforts, the emotional toll was immense. The world had intruded into our private life, and now every interaction carried the weight of exposure and scrutiny. At home, the tension between maintaining normalcy and managing the fallout created a subtle strain. Even minor disagreements felt amplified, underlined by the stress of navigating a social landscape that had expanded far beyond our control. The sense of intrusion, the relentless expectations, and the subtle judgments became a constant background hum, of tension that made even ordinary days feel exhausting. Yet, amidst the pressure and the scrutiny, I discovered a quiet resilience. I realized that while I couldn't control other people's reactions or curiosity, I could control my response. I could set boundaries, assert my rights, and protect the life growing inside me. That realization brought a subtle but powerful sense of empowerment, a recognition that even in chaos, agency was possible. I began to notice patterns. Certain friends respected boundaries, offering congratulations with gentle restraint. Others hovered, probing, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. And in each encounter, I found myself growing more confident in asserting my needs, in speaking my truth, in reclaiming control over the narrative that had been thrust into the public eye. Still, the social pressures continued. Invitations to gatherings, casual conversations at work, even social media notifications reminded me daily that our secret had been exposed. And each reminder carried the same dual message: excitement and joy for the new life, but also intrusion and erosion of our boundaries. I realized, slowly and painfully, that this was not a temporary discomfort, it was a new reality. Our private life, once carefully shielded, had become a shared spectacle, and navigating it required vigilance, patience, and deliberate action. Every interaction, every smile, every conversation became an exercise in self-protection and boundary setting, and through it all, my fiancé remained a steadfast presence, providing both emotional support and practical guidance. Together, we navigated the complex web of familial expectation, social scrutiny, and emotional turbulence. And in those moments, I began to understand a fundamental truth: while the world may intrude, the strength of our partnership, the clarity of our boundaries, and the love we shared would determine how we survived and thrived amidst the chaos. By the end of Part 2, the landscape of our lives had shifted. The social fallout was ongoing, the emotional tension palpable, and the challenge of asserting privacy amidst public attention had become a central theme of our days. But even in this challenging environment, I began to recognize the power of self-advocacy, of speaking my truth, and of maintaining the integrity of our personal narrative against the pressures of expectation and intrusion. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that should have been calm, simple, ordinary. But there was no ordinary anymore, not since the Instagram story, not since the confrontation with my sister-in-law, and not since the social fallout had begun. The tension hung over the family house like a thick, invisible fog. I sat in the living room, hands clasped tightly, heart hammering, as my fiancé moved quietly around the space, trying to ease the tension. His parents were there too, their expressions a mixture of concern and residual irritation, a reflection of the unresolved energy from previous conflicts. And then, of course, she arrived, my sister-in-law walking in with her usual bright smile. Though it seemed smaller now, a little forced, I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar surge of emotion rising: anger, frustration, fear, and determination. This moment had to be addressed. There was no more waiting, no more tiptoeing around delicate feelings. Boundaries had to be reinforced, and respect had to be demanded, not begged for, not quietly hoped for. She approached, hesitating. "Hey," she began softly, but I cut her off gently, my voice steady. "We need to talk. All of us," I said. Now. Her eyes widened slightly, and my fiancé stepped closer, a subtle signal of support and solidarity. His parents shifted in their seats, sensing the gravity of what was coming. I looked at everyone, taking a deep breath. This is about respect. This is about boundaries. This is about understanding that some things in our lives, our choices, our timing, our privacy are not up for discussion or disclosure without consent. His sister nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I'm sorry. I really am. I don't doubt that you feel sorry, I said, but that's not enough. We've been dealing with fallout for weeks. Messages, questions, assumptions from friends, family, coworkers. Our private life has been put on display without our agreement. This is not about anger. It's about protecting what is ours and ensuring this never happens again. His mother spoke, her voice calm but firm. We want to support you. We want to respect your wishes, but you must understand that our excitement, we didn't mean to hurt you. I nodded, acknowledging her words, but my resolve didn't waver. I understand that, and I appreciate the sentiment, but understanding doesn't erase the consequences. From now on, our boundaries must be clear, and they must be respected. No exceptions. The room was quiet. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of us. It was a defining moment, not just for our family dynamic, but for the future of our privacy, our pregnancy, and our relationship. I turned to my sister-in-law, making eye contact. We love you, but if our boundaries are crossed again, there will be consequences. This isn't a threat, it's a necessity. We cannot allow private moments in our lives to be publicized without our consent. Do you understand? She nodded, voice small but earnest. I understand. I promise it won't happen again. My fiancé reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. In that simple gesture, I felt strength, love, and unity. We had faced the conflict head-on, established the rules, and reaffirmed our commitment to each other and our unborn child. As the conversation wound down, a sense of cautious relief settled over the room. The storm hadn't disappeared, it would linger, like shadows waiting at the edges, but we had drawn clear lines. We had established control where it had been lost. And in that, I found a deep, grounding sense of empowerment. Later, as we walked home together, I reflected on everything that had happened. The chaos, the messages, the confrontations, it had all been painful, exhausting, and at times overwhelming. But it had also been a test, a crucible through which our boundaries, our patience, and our relationship had been forged stronger than before. I realized that protecting privacy, asserting control, and defending personal choices isn't just about preventing chaos, it's about defining who we are, what we value, and what we will and will not tolerate. And in that realization, I felt a quiet, unwavering sense of clarity. Our story belongs to us, and no one, not even the people closest to us, has the right to dictate its terms. As I lay in bed that night, feeling the faint, precious movements of our child within me, I whispered promises into the darkness, promises of protection, of love, and of steadfast defense against any intrusion. The challenges were far from over, But for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of control returning to our lives, and a renewed commitment to safeguard the most important thing we had: our family, our choices, and our secret until the time was right. The days turned into weeks, and yet the aftermath of that single Instagram post continued to echo through every corner of my life. I had thought that once the confrontation with my sister-in-law and the family discussion were over, the chaos would subside. But it didn't. Not really. Every notification on my phone felt like a drumbeat of anxiety. Each ping, each buzz, reminded me that our secret had been compromised, that our lives were now, in some subtle way, public property. Friends who once respected our timing began casually asking questions, as if the act of sharing had given them license to pry. They wanted details: baby names, due dates, even what I was eating. It was suffocating. At work, the environment shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Colleagues would smile, make light comments, or drop subtle references to our pregnancy in conversations where it didn't belong. While some genuinely meant well, others seemed to derive a sort of satisfaction from having access to private information that I had not shared myself. It was as if our family secret had become a communal story, and I was powerless to reclaim it. One afternoon, I found myself in the break room, forced into a conversation I had hoped to avoid. "Congratulations again," one coworker said, leaning casually against the counter. "So, do you know if it's a boy or a girl yet?" I forced a polite smile, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "We haven't decided yet," I replied softly, careful to maintain composure. But I could feel the tension building, the sense of intrusion gnawing at me. My personal life, the intimate choice of how and when to share information, had been stripped away, and I was acutely aware of how exposed I felt. I excused myself, retreating to the sanctuary of the restroom. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I felt a wave of helplessness. I wanted to scream, to cry, to escape from this constant scrutiny. But there was no escape, not from the curiosity, not from the excitement of those around me, not from the invisible weight of their expectations. At home, I tried to decompress, to find solace in the quiet presence of my fiancé. He had been my anchor through it all, the one steady point amidst the storm of questions and assumptions. He listened patiently as I vented, holding my hand, reminding me that we were in this together. "We'll set boundaries," he said gently, stroking my hair. "We'll protect our privacy as best we can. And anyone who doesn't respect that, they'll have to learn." His words were comforting, but they couldn't erase the residual stress. Each day brought new challenges, subtle reminders that our lives had been temporarily stolen from us, displayed without consent. I realized that this wasn't just a single event, it was a lesson in vigilance, a reminder that personal boundaries must be consistently asserted, even against those who mean well. Social gatherings became exercises in strategy and restraint. Every smile, every conversation, every casual question required careful navigation. I found myself measuring words, gauging reactions, and calculating how much to reveal and how much to deflect. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally, and yet, amidst the tension, there was growth. I learned to assert myself more confidently, to speak clearly about my boundaries, and to protect the intimate corners of my life with unwavering resolve. I realized that privacy wasn't something granted automatically, it was something actively defended. A right that required vigilance, courage, and clarity. In quiet moments, lying in bed beside my fiancé, I reflected on how much had changed. Our private world had been invaded, our choices scrutinized, and our boundaries tested. But through it all, we had remained united, vigilant, and committed to protecting the life we were creating. I knew that the challenges were far from over. There would be more questions, more curiosity, more subtle pressures from friends, family, and even strangers who felt entitled to know our story. But I was learning, slowly and painfully, to navigate this new reality with grace, strength, and determination. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, feeling the faint flutter of life inside me, I whispered a silent vow: no one will take this from us again. Our story, our choices, our privacy, it is ours to protect. And we will together. By the middle of the following week, I realized that our private life was no longer just a personal matter, it had become a social performance. Every interaction, no matter how casual, carried the weight of expectation. Friends and acquaintances seemed to assume that I was prepared to discuss every detail of my pregnancy, as if our lives had become public property overnight. One evening, a group of friends invited me to dinner. I hesitated but agreed, hoping that a normal outing might restore some sense of ordinary connection. The restaurant was warm, bustling, filled with the low hum of conversation. But from the moment we arrived, I felt the subtle pressure of curiosity, the unspoken expectation that I would share, explain, perform for their excitement. "Congratulations again," one friend said brightly, clinking her glass against mine. "So, how far along are you now?" I smiled politely, keeping my response short. 10 weeks, I said softly, hoping that would satisfy the curiosity without inviting further questions, but it didn't. Questions followed, fast and casual, each one chipping away at the control I had so carefully tried to maintain. "Do you know the gender yet? Have you started a registry? Are you feeling okay?" I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the surge of frustration and exhaustion. Each question, though innocent on its face, felt like an intrusion into a life that had been meant to remain private for a time. I realized that I had been navigating these social waters for weeks, always cautious, always protective, but now, the pressure was relentless. I excused myself to the restroom, taking deep breaths, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Looking at my reflection, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. The private choices that should have belonged to my fiancé and me alone had been exposed, dissected, and discussed as if they were public knowledge. It was exhausting to constantly measure words, to constantly defend my boundaries, and to constantly manage the expectations of others. Returning to the table, I decided to be firm. "I appreciate your excitement," I said gently but firmly, "but there are some things we aren't ready to discuss yet. Please respect our privacy. This is a very personal time for us, and we're asking for a little patience." There was a pause. Some faces softened, understanding dawning in their expressions. Others glanced away, slightly awkward, realizing that their curiosity had overstepped a boundary. But the message was clear: our private life was ours to control, not a topic for public discussion. Even in the digital realm, the pressure persisted. Notifications continued to appear, subtle reminders that our lives were being observed, commented upon, and dissected. Social media had turned our private world into a public stage, and every interaction carried an underlying tension. Yet, through these challenges, I began to notice a shift within myself. I was no longer just reacting. I was asserting. I was no longer quietly enduring intrusion. I was setting boundaries, defending my right to privacy, and reclaiming ownership over my own story. And while the external pressures remained, I found a growing sense of empowerment in this assertion. At home, my fiancé and I would debrief each day, discussing strategies for handling questions, encounters, and invitations. Together, we crafted responses that were polite, clear, and unwavering, ensuring that our boundaries were respected without alienating friends or family unnecessarily. Through it all, I realized that protecting our privacy was not just about limiting exposure, it was about teaching others to respect our autonomy, to understand that our lives were ours to share on our own terms. And while this lesson was difficult, emotional, and often exhausting, it was necessary. By the end of that week, I felt a subtle but significant change. The constant anxiety, the relentless pressure had begun to give way to a sense of control. I wasn't powerless. I had a voice, a right to privacy, and the ability to assert boundaries even in the face of excitement, curiosity, and social expectation. And as I lay in bed each night, feeling the soft, rhythmic flutter of life inside me, I whispered silently to our unborn child, "We will protect our family, our choices, and our story. We will navigate the world on our own terms, and no one will take that from us." It was mid-afternoon when I realized that the repercussions of that Instagram post weren't just lingering, they were evolving. Friends who had once respected my boundaries now approached conversations with a subtle insistence, a casual probing that masked itself as concern or excitement. They asked about appointments, nursery ideas, even what I was craving. Each question, though polite, carried an unspoken assumption that our private life was no longer ours to protect. At work, the scrutiny was constant, subtle, and draining. Colleagues lingered near my desk, their smiles bright, their questions polite, but intrusive. "Are you feeling okay?" one coworker asked, leaning on the edge of my cubicle. "Do you need anything? Maybe advice from someone who's been through this?" I forced a small, polite smile, nodding. "I'm fine, thank you." But internally, I felt a surge of frustration. Each well-meaning question was another reminder that my personal life had been thrust into the spotlight without consent. Even casual social media interactions became minefields, comments, likes, and tagged posts that revealed how quickly information traveled. The constant attention became exhausting. Even minor interactions like chatting with the barista at the coffee shop or running errands felt heavy with expectation. Everyone seemed to know. Everyone seemed to assume familiarity with our private life. I had to carefully weigh every word, every gesture, to maintain a semblance of control over what I shared. One evening, at a small gathering with neighbors, the tension reached a subtle peak. Conversations began innocently enough, but questions about the pregnancy were layered with unsolicited advice and assumptions. I felt cornered, my patience fraying. "We just want to be helpful," one neighbor said cheerfully, noticing my withdrawal. "I appreciate that," I replied, carefully choosing my words. "But there are things we're not ready to discuss. Please respect our privacy." Her smile faltered slightly, the invisible line drawn. I could feel the weight of expectation in the room, the subtle pressure to perform excitement, to share more than I was comfortable with. It was exhausting to constantly balance politeness with firm boundaries. Even among close friends, the dynamics shifted. Some, genuinely excited, respected my requests and quietly celebrated without pressuring me for details. Others struggled to understand, slipping into subtle forms of intrusion, unaware or perhaps unwilling to recognize the boundaries I had set. The complexity of these social interactions created a constant background of stress, draining my emotional energy. At home, I leaned on my fiancé more than ever. He became my strategist, my advocate, and my calm center. Together, we discussed scenarios, practiced responses, and reinforced the importance of our shared boundaries. "It's okay to say no," he reminded me gently. "It's okay to protect yourself. It's our life, our family, our story." The constant negotiation between public expectation and private reality forced me to confront my own limits. I realized that asserting boundaries wasn't just about defending privacy, it was about survival. About maintaining emotional well-being amidst relentless social pressures. Yet even in the stress and tension, I discovered an inner strength I hadn't fully recognized before. The ability to articulate my needs, to assert control, and to demand respect became a source of empowerment. Each interaction where I stood my ground reinforced the reality that while curiosity and excitement might be well-intentioned, they did not give anyone the right to violate our privacy. By the end of Part 3C, I felt both weary and fortified. The challenges were far from over, but I was learning, day by day, how to navigate the intricate web of social expectations. Each interaction, each small victory in asserting my boundaries, was a step toward reclaiming control over our private life, reinforcing the sanctuary we were creating for ourselves and our unborn child. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to the quiet rhythm of our home and feeling the subtle movement of life within me, I whispered once again, "No one can take this from us. We define our story, our boundaries, and our privacy, and we will protect them together." It was a Friday evening, and the weight of the past weeks pressed down harder than ever. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone's curiosity, excitement, and expectations converged in one relentless, invisible force. I could feel it in every interaction, every glance, every message. The delicate balance of patience, diplomacy, and restraint I had maintained was beginning to fray. We were at a small family gathering, meant to be celebratory, but the tension was palpable. His parents were present, his sister lingered nearby, and a handful of extended family members, already aware of our pregnancy, hovered like specters of judgment and expectation. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, expecting, anticipating. I took a deep breath, feeling the subtle flutter of life inside me. I realized that the time for gentle deflections and patient explanations had passed. This was the moment to assert, to set the final line in the sand. "Everyone," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate your excitement and your support, truly, but I need to be clear. Our lives, our privacy, and our choices are ours alone. We will share what we choose, when we choose. No one, not friends, not family, not coworkers, has the right to decide otherwise." There was a stunned pause. Eyes widened, faces softened, some with guilt, some with understanding, some with subtle resentment. His sister shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I pressed on. "This includes social media, casual conversations, and even well-intentioned questions. If you care about us, please respect our boundaries. Repeatedly ignoring them is not harmless. It's a violation of our trust, and it will not be tolerated. I felt my fiancé squeeze my hand, grounding me, giving me courage. I continued, my voice unwavering. I know some of you mean well. I know your excitement is genuine, but excitement does not grant entitlement. Curiosity does not override consent. Our story belongs to us and it will remain that way until we choose to share it. His sister finally looked up, tears in her eyes. I understand, she whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how serious this was. I nodded, allowing a moment of acknowledgement. It's not just about realization, it's about action. From now on, respect our privacy. Not occasionally, not selectively, but consistently. That's the only way we can continue to navigate this time safely, peacefully, and with dignity. The room remained silent, the weight of the message settling over everyone. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity and control. The social chaos, the intrusive curiosity, the subtle pressures, they hadn't vanished, but they had been confronted. Boundaries had been drawn, consequences had been stated, and the ownership of our story had been reclaimed. After the gathering, my fiancé and I walked home together. The cool night air was soothing, a contrast to the storm of emotions and tensions that had filled the day. We spoke quietly, reflecting on the moment and its significance. You were amazing, he said softly. You spoke clearly, firmly, and with grace. You protected us, and you reclaimed our narrative. I smiled, exhaustion and relief mingling. It wasn't easy, I admitted, but I realized something important. Protecting our privacy isn't selfish. It's necessary. And standing up for our boundaries is the only way to maintain our life, our family, and our peace. That night, lying in bed, feeling the faint, precious movements of our unborn child, I allowed myself a rare moment of calm. The storm wasn't entirely over. Social curiosity would persist. Family dynamics would continue to challenge, but I knew we were prepared. We had drawn the line, set the rules, and reclaimed control over our private life. And as I drifted into sleep, I whispered a vow to our child and to myself. We will protect our family, our choices, and our story. No one will ever take that from us. Not now, not ever. The weeks following the confrontation felt like a slow, deliberate exhale. The storm that had raged through our lives, family tensions, social curiosity, intrusive questions, was gradually settling. The boundaries we had set were being respected more consistently, and the sense of intrusion that had once pressed on every moment was easing. A tea home, the rhythm of our days began to normalize. Mornings were quiet, filled with the simple intimacy of coffee, shared laughter, and whispered conversations. I cherished these moments more than I had ever realized. Understanding that peace was not just a luxury, it was a necessity for the life growing inside me. The constant notifications that had once set my nerves on edge now arrived with less intensity, and I no longer felt the need to check every comment or message. I had reclaimed my control over the narrative, and it felt empowering. The world was still there, observing, curious, excited, but it no longer dictated my experience. I reflected often on the growth this journey had forced upon me. I had learned to speak with unwavering clarity, to assert boundaries without apology, and to navigate social pressures with intention. I had learned that privacy was not negotiable, and that defending it was an act of love for myself, for my fiancé, and for the child we were bringing into the world. Even in moments of exhaustion, when the weight of emotional labor pressed on my shoulders, I felt a quiet pride. I had faced the storms head on, and I had emerged stronger, more confident, and more certain of my ability to protect what mattered most. Our family life was beginning to settle into a delicate, joyful rhythm. Quiet evenings at home, gentle conversations about hopes and dreams, and shared plans for the future became the foundation of our new reality. Every decision, from the smallest daily choice to the biggest long-term plan, was guided by the principle we had fought to uphold, that our life, our choices, and our story were ours alone. I found myself noticing the subtle ways that my fiancé and I had grown closer through the process. The challenges, though difficult, had forged a deeper connection between us. He had been my steadfast ally, my calm in the storm, and my unwavering support. And I, in turn, had learned to trust him more fully, to rely on his judgment, and to celebrate the strength of our partnership. There were still moments of tension, small reminders of the past weeks. A comment from a well-meaning friend, a fleeting glance from a family member, the occasional intrusive question. But now, I met these moments with confidence rather than anxiety, with boundaries rather than hesitation. I had learned to navigate the delicate balance of engagement and protection, knowing exactly where to draw the line, and as I lay in bed at night, feeling the soft, rhythmic flutter of our unborn child, I allowed myself to fully absorb the peace that had slowly returned. The journey had been difficult, filled with conflict, frustration, and moments of doubt, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered resilience I didn't know I possessed, courage I hadn't tapped into, and a steadfast commitment to protecting the life we were creating together. I whispered into the darkness, a vow to our child and to myself: we have faced the chaos, defended our boundaries, and reclaimed our story. We will continue to protect our family, our choices, and our privacy. And in that protection, we find freedom, love, and peace. The mornings had a new rhythm now, gentle and deliberate. I would wake to the soft golden light spilling through the curtains, the quiet hum of the city outside, and the faint movements of our unborn child reminding me of the life growing within me. My fiancé was always there, often already awake, brewing coffee or preparing breakfast, a quiet ritual that had become sacred in its simplicity. We took time to savor these moments, small acts of connection that grounded us. Sitting together over toast and tea, discussing our plans for the week, or simply sharing a quiet smile, these moments were filled with a contentment I had never known before. The chaos of social expectations and family drama had faded into a distant memory, replaced by intentionality and peace. Even the smallest tasks, grocery shopping, tidying the apartment, preparing meals, became opportunities for connection and laughter. We learned to navigate life as a team, sharing responsibilities and supporting each other's choices. The ordinary became extraordinary because we were fully present, fully aware of the preciousness of these moments. There were still challenges, of course. Occasional messages from friends or family reminded us that the world outside our home remained curious, sometimes intrusive. But now, I approached these moments differently. Where once I would have felt anxiety or frustration, I now responded with calmness and clarity, reinforcing our boundaries without guilt or hesitation. I began to notice the subtle shifts within myself. The fear and vulnerability that had dominated my thoughts earlier had given way to confidence and resilience. I had learned to trust my instincts, to speak up when necessary, and to protect the life and love we were nurturing. The act of asserting my boundaries had not only safeguarded our privacy, it had strengthened my sense of self. Evenings became a time for reflection and shared dreams. We would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking softly about hopes for our future, imagining the life we wanted to create for our child. I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the child growing inside me, but for the relationship we had built, the lessons we had learned, and the peace we had fought to reclaim. There were moments of vulnerability, 2 nights when the weight of responsibility pressed on me, or when old anxieties resurfaced. But these moments were no longer overwhelming. I had learned that vulnerability did not equate to weakness, and that acknowledging my feelings was part of maintaining balance and inner strength. One day, while arranging the nursery with my fiancé, I paused to take it all in. The soft pastel colors, the tiny furniture, the carefully chosen decorations, they represented more than preparation for a child. They were symbols of our agency, our choices, and the sanctuary we had built together. Each item, each detail, was a testament to the life we were shaping, the love we were nurturing, and the boundaries we had fiercely protected. And in the quiet of these daily moments, I realized something profound. Happiness and peace were not the absence of challenges or conflicts. They were the product of resilience, of conscious choices, of love and partnership, and of protecting the things that mattered most. As night fell and I lay in bed, feeling the gentle movement of our unborn child, I whispered a quiet promise: we will continue to nurture our family, protect our boundaries, and savor the beauty of ordinary moments. This is our story, and we will live it fully, with love and intention. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, painting our apartment in gentle gold. Mornings had become a sanctuary, a time to breathe, to reflect, and to appreciate the life we had fought to protect. Every day was intentional, every moment filled with quiet joy and subtle celebration of what we had built together. The weeks of tension, conflict, and social scrutiny now felt like distant echoes. Though the world outside still buzzed with curiosity, we no longer allowed it to penetrate our sanctuary. We had reclaimed our narrative, set our boundaries, and learned to navigate life with clarity, confidence, and love. I found myself laughing more freely, savoring the simple pleasures of daily life, coffee shared across the table, the soft touch of my fianki's hand, the gentle flutter of life inside me. Each sensation reminded me of resilience, of courage, and of the love that had carried us through the storm. Occasionally, messages or questions arrived, remnants of the world outside our bubble, but they no longer unsettled me. I responded with calmness, kindness, and firmness, maintaining the boundaries that had been so hard won. I had discovered the truth that happiness is not the absence of challenges, it is the mastery of them, the courage to protect what matters, and the ability to live authentically despite the pressures of others. We began to prepare for the new chapter in our lives with intention and joy. The nursery became a place of wonder and anticipation, a physical manifestation of the life we were creating and protecting. Each choice, each detail, was a reflection of our love, our partnership, and the safe, nurturing environment we were committed to providing. I reflected on the journey, the chaos of public curiosity, the conflicts with family, the challenges of asserting boundaries, and I realized that those difficulties had shaped me in ways I could never have imagined. I was stronger, more confident, and more attuned to my own needs and values. I had learned that protecting privacy is an act of love, not selfishness, that speaking up is not confrontation, but preservation, and that the life we build together must be safeguarded with clarity, courage, and unwavering commitment. Evenings were our time to celebrate life in its quiet, tender moments. We would sit together, share our thoughts, laugh, and sometimes simply exist in the stillness, appreciating the comfort of love, partnership, and security. Every heartbeat, every small gesture, every moment of connection reminded me of the beauty of intentional living. And as I lay in bed each night, feeling the gentle movements of our child, I whispered a vow, one that encompassed everything we had endured and everything we were building together. We will protect our family, our choices, and our story. We will navigate the world with courage, love, and intention. Life may bring challenges, but together we will face them, and together we will thrive. For the first time in weeks, I felt a profound, unwavering peace. The storm had passed, the boundaries were respected, and the life we had fought to safeguard was flourishing. I understood now that strength, love, and joy are intertwined, that by protecting what is precious, by asserting what is right, and by nurturing what matters most, we create not just a family, but a sanctuary of hope, resilience, and happiness. And in that quiet, golden light, surrounded by love, I felt whole, ready for the future, ready for our child, ready to live our story on our own terms, fully, freely, and with unshakable joy.